Hey class. This is going to be an introduction to, this is going to be an updates to your homework to really explain to you what's going on and what you have to do to achieve it. Now, some of you have already completed it, so I do apologize for getting this video out so late, but the majority of you have not. So this is designed to this walkthrough is designed to help you guys go through and pretty much create this application based on the requirements that was given. Okay, so let's get started with that. All right. So the first thing we want to do is we want to actually create a new function, right? So create the new function, which is new function, right? So in order to do that, we need to create a function to check the ID to make sure that it's unique. And then we'll create a function to insert the new user into the reg user table. And then we want to add a success message to that function, and then error messages, whatever errors occur when we want to show the errors. Okay, so we'll start with that, and then we'll do the update function, and we can clean up the code after we're done with all of that stuff. Okay. So my approach to this is fairly straightforward, but if you load up the project that you got from that you downloaded, it should actually open up here, and then all you have to do is go into properties, and you can change this name to almost anything. In my case, I just called it Joe's contact form. You can call it anything you want, but that's the gist of it. That's all you really have to do. So this will change it to the contact form to show up as yours, and then uh, yeah, that's pretty much it. Now, in order to display the proper name, you want to highlight. You want to go into design mode. This is the source mode. This is the design mode. So in the design mode, you want to select the main window here, and then you go There's properties. There's code. There's events, and then there's on the right here. Let me move my thing here. Okay. So if I so you could actually go to properties, events, or code. You want to highlight the properties here, and you want to change this title to. In my case, I want to call it Joe's, right? Contact form. Okay. So now that we've done that, you can now execute the project, right? Typically, when you open this project up in NetBeans, you simply have to go to the folder of where the project is. Mine happens to be in C Java Projects MySQL demo. Okay, so you can open it up directly from there, and it should, yeah. But when you open it, you have to select the project file. So, an example, you have to select this project file. Now, by design, it should be, by design, I've zipped the file in such a way that you could actually go directly to the folder and extracted folder, and then just select the MySQL demo project here. Okay, and now that you're in here, right, and you highlighted users, the user form here, right? Keep in mind that in order to open it, you have to just double click this main form here, and it should open it up here. Again, you can toggle between design and source and history. The history is all the changes you've made. At any point, you can actually go to the history and revert your changes. But yeah, but that's besides the point here. So so you can go into this main form here, and then just want to say I just want to change the title. So you can change it in the title right here. If you change the title and then you press run, you want to select the main form as the main class, right? So we so you select the remember permanently, it'll always run that main form. But as you can see here, I've changed the title to Joe's contact form. Now there's a lot of other things you can do here. Right out of the box, it should already work on your selection, right? As you select these, you can see that the output down here actually shows the different selections that you've made. So, for example, Fritz, Nissim, Kevin, right? So as I select Kevin, it actually shows you exactly which index I selected. And it also reflects up here that the user has changed to 10 to as the selection. Now, now in order to create our new our new user, right? We need to be able to say, hey, I want to be able to add a new ID. So right now we only have a label as the ID. So we want to change that to a text box. Now, in order to do that, all we got to do is add a text field here, right? And then there's this text box here. Let's see, it's over here. So there's a user text box that we have to find, and I believe it's right here. Yeah. Okay. So this is the J label. That's user ID. We want to. We can just pretty much delete this. Okay. Once we delete this, and then we can go in and rename this one to uh, J. Well, user ID. Now, once we do that, right? Well, we can go properties and clear the text field. So this becomes a text field. Now, you see what we did here was that we actually set this so that it's set this in such a way that it's anyways. Yeah, I just wanted to look better. So what we've done is we changed this into the user ID. Okay, so we changed it from a text box to a label. Now, there's multiple ways you can do this. This is the easiest way I found. But when we go into our source, the user ID should be reflected here. Okay, so user ID is right here. So the set tax is still valid because it's the same function to do one or the other. Um, uh, to set the text between label to an ID. I mean, a label to a text field. So that's what we've done here. Uh, now, if yeah, so yeah, now that we've done that, we want to test to make sure that it runs, right? So it does run. Okay, so when I do this, oh, the text field has to. Let's see. Let's go back here. Design. Set the text field here. See if it changes anything. Right. So here we go. So now that we've updated that, you can see that the text field actually changes, right? So as we select each number, it changes just like the label that used to be there. Now these new and this new button already pretty much clears everything, right? So that's how I designed it. So it clears everything, but it sets this variable new up here. That's not what we want. We want it to actually say um, allow the user to enter an ID. Right now, you can do that, but instead of having something arbitrary there, we can actually do that right in the code. Okay, so in order to do that, when we first load up the when you first when we actually do the new item uh, button for forms here, we set the text to blank instead of new. Okay, so now that text is blank. Now, when we click the new button, it clears everything, but at the same time, we want to find, um, yeah, I think that should be fine. Yeah. So we do that first, right? So but there's a way. We need to have a mechanism to determine whether the form is in a new state and a or a or an update state. So let's say when we say we want to save this form, right? When we click save, if it's a new form, right? If the user is brand new and nothing's been selected, then it'll be a new user, and we have to show that state. So in order to show that state, we have to say we have to declare a variable up here to accommodate for that. Now in Java classes, to declare a public variable, you just go public int public struct mode. So one of the few one of the not primitives, but one of the objects that exists in Java is an enum, and an enum is something that exists and not just Java, but in multiple other and all other programming languages. What it allows us to do is specify several items that we want to be in a accessible variable, right? So we just want to say define in public enum mode, right? And in this mode, we want to say we want to have a mode of update or a mode of new, right? And then a mode of update. Okay, so you can have an update and a new. Now in this, now we have an enumerable that's a new and update. So it's one. It has two states in it. So so we're gonna use this enum to determine whether our items are essentially our items are in a state where um, when we say, "Hey, we want to," when we so that we determine whether or not we want to insert the items or we want to update the items. So again, we want to go in here and say, so when the new button is instantiated, we want to say, now we are in a um, what do you want to call this, modes? Okay. Now, modes is not the storage mechanism. We actually want to say public uh, int um, okay. Now we can set the mode to um, yeah. When you press a new value, right? Then we say mode is Okay, so now as we select a new button action performed, we have that mode new. Now we could also do this as the main form init because as we initialize the main form, we come up with a screen that's blank, and that's we can say, hey, this is in the new mode. So we can say um, mode. Uh, Now there's other mechanisms to do this too. We could just say that, hey, I I want to set it to just an integer, and then I can base everything off of that integer. But in this way, but if we do it this way, we discreetly say, hey, this is these are the valid states, and we don't have to we don't need any questions about whether or not something is defined as a certain criteria, because what these enumerators present is the opportunity to have different states, determine different states, and that way we can actually know exactly what the current state is. Okay. Um, so yeah, the enumeration path is it's probably one of the better constructs in programming languages. It allows you to do something like that. Like I said, it's totally viable to use integers and stuff like that, but it just confuses the person that's going to be reviewing your code. And the best source code is really self-documenting code, and this is what we're doing. We're self-documenting it. There's no question as to see, hey, what mode are we in? Well, here we're going to say as we click a new button action perform, we're going to set it to the mode equals new. As we uh, as we go to the main form here, and we say, hey, I want to as my components get created, I want to set the mode to a new mode. Okay, so to see this in action, of course, we are going to go here, and then actually right before we do that, in order to show that we actually did that, right? Well, that it works. We want to do this. We're gonna print out something. Okay, system dot print line. Oh, if you just saw what I did there, s out shorthand. And when you type out the s out and you do a shorthand like that, you press tab. It basically does this whole system dot out print line for you. Okay, so that's a neat little trick. Anyways, you want to say, hey, mode, and then we can say plus mode that string. All right, so this should print out the mode that we need. Now, when you do a toString in JavaScript, well, in Java, what it usually does is just prints out the object value. So let's do that. Now, when we execute this, right, we should see that we're selecting these IDs, but when we click the new button here, you see that it comes out the mode equals new. So we're just saying that, hey, that's the new mode. That as we click a new button, it switches the state to new, right? As we now another thing is that we want to switch the state back to update as we click the update. So as we click the update button, so it should be right here, right? So here we can just say mode equals modes dot update. Okay, so now we can do the same thing here. We just say copy and paste down here. Right, so we're gonna print out our selection method here. All right, so eventually we're gonna comment these out because we don't want to need to print it out every time. But this is for testing, so we can just say, hey, when I click on the button here now, right? You can see that it switches from mode to update. Okay, and then when keep clicking on it, it's all update all the time. But when I click the new, our mode switches to new. Okay, and it clears out all the user information here. Okay, so now we have our state. Now we can just say, hey, what happens when I press save? Well, nothing happens right now. What happens when I press delete? Well, nothing happens right now too. But if I click on save, I'm anticipating that the save button is supposed to launch me into another action, right? So when I click on save, we open and we create, and when I double click on save in the design, then we open up a new save action button, perform event handler. Okay, so what happens with in this event handler is first we get the mode, right? Um, so we say if mode equals modes dot new. So in the new mode, we're going to try to insert something. This should be NEW. Okay. Else if update modes equals modes. Sorry. If mode equals modes update, then we want to say we want to output. Yeah, let's do this. It's just another print line mode again. So this is to ensure that our modes are working correctly. Right, and then a really cool trick is if you press Alt Shift and down, oops, it moves it down. But if you press Control Shift down, it replicates a string on the current line. So let's say if I want to do this, Control Shift down, and you'll replicate the current line. And then we can just copy that and paste it down here, right? Now this is really helpful when you're trying to do variables and stuff like that. But we just do it this way then. All right, so if I press the save button while it's in new mode, then I'm anticipating that it's going to print out the new mode. If I press the button while it's in update mode, then I'm anticipating that it'll print out the update mode. Else, I'm going to say no mode selected. And in this case, I don't want to do anything, right? I want to say, hey, I'm not going to print out. I'm not going to do any action because it's not one of the valid states. So we save this, we run it. Okay, so if I do I'm in the update mode now, right? So as you can see down here, my mode is update. If I press save, so I'm in the save update mode, right? If I press new, and then I press save, it'll be in save new mode. So we know that it's entering this logic, right? We know that as we switch the modes to update and new, it's going to insert. It's going to go into these two logic functions here. Okay, so we know that it's going to enter this. Now that we know that, the first thing we want to do is we want to connect to the database, right? So, well, we want because we're let's attack one mode at a time. Let's attack the new mode first. Okay, so in order to do the new mode, right, we want to jump into the. Well, we want to first determine whether or not. So, for example, here. So if I put in this user ID, right, 10, right, and there's an existing user ID in here already, I have to check to make sure that the ID doesn't exist, or I'm going to try to insert a new record. And what happens is that if you try to do that, MySQL is going to throw you an error saying that you're trying to insert a duplicate record. Now, because 10 the user ID is a primary key, that's what's going to happen. You're just going to get an error back when you try to do it. So first things first. First thing is that we want to create a function that will grab that new ID for us, and well determine whether or not that ID is a duplicate. Okay, so the first thing we want to do then is we want to say, um, in so in Java, if you want to create a function, you just go, especially within a class, right? Because everything here we're doing here is within the context of a class. Okay, so we just want to say public. Well, it could be a private function too, because we're just all doing this all internally. So private um, boolean, because we want to say, hey, I want to return a true or false whether or not um, uh, the ID is valid. So a good name to call that is, let's just say I want to check the ID, right? So we can just call that function check ID, right? And then we're really just going to pass in the integer value of the ID. Partially, all right. So in order to check the validity, check whether or not the ID is duplicated, um, we want to say, hey, I'm just going to return true, so that I don't do anything if I fail to connect to a database. If I do anything wrong, I just want to return true, so that hey, it's a duplicate ID. So don't go any further. That's the gist of it, right? So that's the logic behind it. So I could explain this in a better format here. So, well, what are we gonna do first? We want to say, hey, as we go the into the array, into the function, we want to say, hey, I want to connect to the server. Uh, right, and then I just want to find the ID that's being passed in the database. So I just want to select, right, from reg user, right, where ID equals ID, right. Now, once I do that, though, right, once I have that, well, what do I do? So if ID equals ID, then I want to say return false, because return true, because it does equal. So that means that the condition is that, hey, I have a duplicate ID. Now, if ID not equals ID, then I want to return false. Because at this point, the ID does not equal the ID. And finally, I just want to return otherwise, return true, right? Because at this point, all of the IDs are equivalent. So we want to say, we're just going to return, at this point, our tests have failed, and there's a problem with the connection. So we just want to say, yeah, there's a problem with the connection. We're just going to return true, making the state state a false state, so that we don't continue execution. All right, so let's translate this to code. So in order to translate that to code, we simply in here we simply first one is we'll wrap every anytime you connect to a database, you want to wrap into a try catch, because at any point in here, it's gonna it will it could fail. You know, any point in the database connection could fail. So um, typically, all you want to say is catch and then exception. Exception. Okay. So I do apologize. This is a little bit slower because I'm walking this through one by one for you guys. Okay. So yeah, and we have the exception captured here, and then we just want to say it's a database error. So we just want to say return true. We can also print out our exception here. So we just go. We just go connecting to the database because that's what we're doing here, and then we can just say we just spit out our connection error reason, right? So now remember that you can escape character, so you can go escape character backslash n that would return the carriage, and then you could say um, we can spit out the error message, right? Ex, right? Dot get message, and that should spit out our the reason why we can't connect to the database. Now, if you notice that when I actually connect to the database, I go through this whole process, right? Now we can simplify this by making this connection method into something that we could use over and over again without having to write all this out. So in order to do that, we can say we could create a another function. So let's say private boolean. Again, we want to this connection function to return a boolean if the connection is false. If the connection doesn't work. Okay, so now we're not passing anything in at all, right? So if you work with the if you notice, it actually creates a an auto an auto end bracket as you type in the brackets. So sometimes I tend to do this a lot. I tend to always put the end bracket in there, and you'll see that it fails, right? So really in this function, we just want to say try. Again, we're working with the database, so we will say we also want to say try catch, and then exception. Yes, and then now you'll see that sometimes when you type this stuff out, you'll always have issues. Uh, well, you'll always see that it's not looking the way I want it to. You can always go Control Shift F. It'll do a catch. Sorry, that's my fault. Okay, so Alt Shift F again will format the code for you. Right. The reason we're seeing this is because we're seeing this error pop up here is because we don't have a return object since we're saying we're going to return a boolean. So we just say return false if the connection uh, if anything within this try catch fails, we're going to return false. Okay. So before we do this though, we want to declare a connection uh, method, well, connection variable up here, right? So that we can access it within any of our functions. So let's say connection, right? And then we just want to say, well, we want this connection to be a type of connection. So this is a MySQL connection. So a JDBC connection. And in order for this to work, we need to say, hmm, oh, my fault. There's three ends there. It should be connection. All right, connection here actually um, goes in and it's part of this Java SQL connection up here. Okay, so that's why I was like, why doesn't it work? So again, now that we have the connection variable, we can just say, um, say connection. We can instantiate the connection here now, right? So the it'll just be the same as this connection down here. So it'll be the same exact code. Okay. So we're just pulling that out and putting it in here. Okay. So and then we'll just say return true if this works. We're relying on this catch, this exception capture to catch any errors within the connection if it's false. Okay. So we just say here we're just gonna say system SL tab system.println error database could not connect. Right. So and then we'll say it wouldn't spit out the message of why it didn't connect. Right, so, and then because it failed, we're just going to return false. Well, we don't really have to return false. It'll just fall outside of this catch, and then it'll just return false. We can also have a finally here too, right? We can say finally, then return false, and that works just as well. Okay. Again, you see that how it's not formatted properly. Control Alt Shift F, and you will format it properly. Okay. All right. So that's it for the connect function, right? So how are we going to use this connect function? Well, for every time we're trying to connect to something here, we can just use it, right? So we can say if connect, meaning that if the connection is true, then we do something, right? And then this something is pretty much everything in here, right? So everything up to the catch here, we're gonna do that. All right. Now, because we've done that, we can delete this connection string here. And all right. So and then again, Shift Alt F to format everything. And then now it says, hey, I'm connecting to the database. Whatever errors I have, I can output it based on this. Now we can take the same logic and apply it down here as well. Just copy the code up here and paste it over the connection string here. And boom. And then right after the connection close here, let's put another parentheses and it wraps it everything in place. Alt Shift F again to reorganize the code. And then, yeah, so now we've established the connection to the outside of this. We can quickly test this first before we go any further to make sure that it's right. So as you can see here, it's not right, right? Because it's not pulling the database. So what do we do now, right? Because it's not right, what happened, right? Boolean connect try. So what did I do wrong here? Should work. Okay, so it should actually work. Let's see what I'm doing wrong here. If connect. Oh, I think it's this finally that's causing our issues. Okay. Yeah, that finally kind of sorry, I don't know why I changed it. But yeah, so we can see that this actually works though. Okay. By getting rid of the finally, this actually works. So again, our modes still change. Everything still works the same way as it did before. We do a refresh. Right? So we can see that it works, okay? Now after we exit out of this, we can now say, hey, you know, say, yeah, it works now. So let's go and, right. So the connection works. Refresh method here, and then there's the other method that we use the connection for. Yeah, so the check ID here, right? So we're gonna say if connect, because right now we're trying to establish a connection, right? Okay, then we can say if it's connected, then we could say, hey, I want to check for the ID, right? So really all we want to say is select, um, first we're going to say string, query equals, um, select star from right user, where ID equals plus ID, because we're passing in the ID. Okay. All right. So that's a string that we're gonna. That's the string that we're gonna call the SQL query for. Statements. STA equals connection dot create statement. sta.query. So result set. Result set as equals sta dot execute the query, and we're just executing that query. Now, since we're executing the query, if so, in order to capture exactly a empty result set, we simply have to check to make sure that's to see if there's anything in the database, well, in the return result set. So if we just say if not rs.next, right, meaning that if there's nothing in our result set, we simply say um, so no rows here exist, right? Turn true. So here we return true. Otherwise, sorry, we got the logic backward. We return false, true down here because it does exist, right? Otherwise, we return false. So there's two ways you can look at it. Right? Right? You can say, hey, if there's no if the result set is empty, meaning that there's no ID with it, this ID within the database, then we can say, hey, that's totally valid, and we can return true, meaning there's no valid ID. But the intention here is to say, hey, I want to make sure, I want to see if this ID exists in the database. I'm checking this ID to exist, and then and the idea here is that we return false because it doesn't exist in the database, right? So you can look at it this way, depending on the functionality of how you want this to behave. But really, we want this to behave in such a way that says, hey, it doesn't exist, so we can continue on with whatever it is we're doing, right? So now that this function is created, we can go down here. Now keep in mind that you could put all this into one big function too, right? But we don't want to do that. We want to actually check the ID in here, and then we could say, hey, I checked the ID. It's but always, oh yeah, there's one thing that we should do here. So we want to close that connection here. Right? You always want to close the connection after every query. Okay, so that you don't leave that in memory. Okay, so we're closing the connection here, since we already done our statement. Okay, so you always want to close out of that connection. It doesn't leave it in your memory. It doesn't overfill the registry, the memory registrar. Okay. Um, all right. So once we close that connection, now we can say, "Hey, I just want to check to see if my ID is valid." But in order to get the ID itself, we have to actually parse that ID out of the system, out of our form. And now, Java offers a great way to do this. You just go int id equals parse int, the integer functions dot parse int. Uh, right, this will parse whatever integer is within the user ID. Again, we're targeting the form that's get text, right? We're targeting the form user ID. So the user ID in the form. Basically this text box here. Okay, and again, the name is user ID. Okay, so we're targeting that. So our ID is and is now an integer. Okay, so once we get the integer, we can actually spit it out, saying that Now to do a quick test, we simply go stout, right? ID is plus ID, okay? Now, the very first thing we want to do though is we want to check to make sure that the ID does not exist within the user. Now this could actually happen outside of this, right? Because we want to say, hey, I actually want to do this outside of this because we're going to use the same ID regardless of whether or not this is a this is a this is a new or update method. We're still going to grab the ID. Okay, so we're going to print the ID. Okay, so if I save this, right, and run it, so if I have no selection, I go save. It'll give me an error, right? Because it's not a valid number. Okay, so we could actually handle this by saying try. First we declare ID 0, right? Then we say ID equals this. But we're gonna capture the error, right? So we're gonna say try first. Catch exception. Alright. So we're gonna catch that error. So but we're gonna put this inside here. Okay. So if this number gets set, the ID will always be 0, right? But and we're trying to parse the integer here to determine that. And then if there's an issue with it, we're gonna say sout error ID is not a number. Okay, so so instead of doing that, right, instead of saying that, just print out something that the user doesn't see, we actually want to show the users, show the reason why it's doing that. So to do that, we can do the J option. We can show a message dialog, right? So in order to show the message dialog, that J option pane. Now, Java internally has all of this built in. Okay, so show message dialog is one of those. It's one of those functions. Spell that. Now, this new JFrame means that we haven't established a frame anywhere for this, so we're just gonna create a new one, and we're gonna say we're gonna pull this message error, this error message in here, right, right into this, just like that, and then we terminate it. Now this is generate error because we need to import the actual the actual libraries. Okay, so without the libraries, then this will not work. So you can see that NetBeans is smart enough to figure that out, and we simply just have to import those. So what will happen here, right? So if my integer is not a valid ID, then it's gonna show this message dialog. As you can see here, we run it. So so that's a valid, right? But if we go new here and we try to save, see, error ID is not a number. All right, so so we know that that works because it's not a number. Now, if I put a number in, right? If I put like 23, save, it doesn't go into the issue anymore, right? So my number works now. Okay, So my ID is now a valid number. Now we wanna uh, now since it's a valid number, I can go in and check my ID. So if check ID is ID, so we're passing in this numerical ID into the check ID function up here, right? So we're gonna go through the SQL server and we're gonna go through my SQL server and say, hey, find me the ID here. If it's valid, then I want to say I want to do it again because it's already existing, right? Uh, right. So we have that ID up there, but this check ID doesn't really belong here, right? It actually belongs. We only want to do that if the mode is new, because we really don't want to check the ID at all if it's update, because that's a totally valid state, right? Because if you're doing an update, the ID for a user should already exist. So we just want to check if the mode is new, right? If we check the whether or not the mode it's in there, if it is new, right? If it is if it does show up, then we want to actually do this. We want to output a message telling us that error ID already exists, right? ID already exists. Um, choose a new ID. Okay, we actually want to say the ID already exists, so we want you to choose a new ID. Otherwise, right, we can continue with our execution. Okay, so so the gist of this is that we actually want to say, uh, let's run this and see exactly how it goes. Okay, so we actually say, hey, I want a new a new user. Okay, so if I type an ID that's existing over here, 1 through 50 here, right? If I say 21, just save, their ID already exists. Choose a new ID, because what happens here is that it actually went into our function over here and queries the database saying, "Hey, find me a user with the ID equal to ID," and if it does find it, then it'll just say, "Hey, I found it, so just return true." Otherwise, yeah, it's in the database, so it's false. So it's not in the database, so it's false. Right? So, all right. So that's all. So our function works, right? All these, close all these out. It's probably from the previous instance. Okay, so now we know that it works, okay, and the check ID function works because we're as we go in and we try to we retrieve the ID, it does exist. It found an ID in there, so it's saying that there's a duplicate in there, right? So we have to change the ID number. So let's run this again. Now, if I insert in an ID that's not in there, right? Let's say 123, right? And as it save, what happens? Well, it's allowing us to go forward, right? Because the ID is now valid. Okay. So now we can go in and say, hey, now I have the valid ID. I just want to insert my query into here. But before we do that, we want to go in and capture all of the inputs, right? So this is going to be let's say string uh, first name equals name dot get text. So we're capturing the first name of the first name text box right here, right? So if you look at the code here, the variable name is fname. So we're actually capturing that in this first name yeah, this first name variable. And then we could do this for all the other ones, right? So if I go Control Shift, well, Shift Alt down, well, up, Control Shift down, I can duplicate all of this, right? So let's say first name, last name, city, state, and so on, right? So change this to last name. So in the interest of time, I'm just gonna copy and paste everything over. Right? Oops. What? Okay, that's not working. First name, last name. All right, so I will have to type this all out. All right, I'm gonna skip the video here so that you'll see exactly. I'm gonna edit this in this portion so that we can skip directly to the insertion to the finalized part. But you get the gist of this. We have to take each variable and assign it to a variable here. Right, uh, so this is why it's important to actually name your form objects. So with um, your form text boxes contextually, so you can actually directly access it based on the name, so that it doesn't, so that you don't have to go through the process of trying to guess work on exactly what each of these things are. Right. So again, state. Zip address. Job. I don't know why not being suck. uh, it won't even let me do my insertions properly. Okay, but whatever. I really don't like this ID. We're stuck with it, so bear with me here. Um, there's also a B date, right? So one first name, last name, city, state, zip, address, job, phone, email, birth date. I think that's all we need. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 is ID. That should be right. Okay, so again, these have to correlate. So state, zip, address, job, phone. I think job is called occupation. Email, and then due date. All right, so all of these are stored into variables now, so we can basically use them as such, right? So because of that, we can actually go here. But before I do that, no, let's just do that. Okay. Yeah. So okay, so let's go here and say now that we have all of this. Now keep in mind that you want to do this right in the front here, preload it up front here, so that you can use both functions. Okay, both the new and update functions. So it's all right. So we can go in and say, hey, if check ID, um, if check ID is true, then we want to say, hey, it's a duplicate. We're going to show you an error message. Otherwise, we can go in and say, now let's try to connect to the database and see if we can um, actually do something like, yeah. So we can actually do an insert, right? So now now we just say if connect. Again, we're connecting to the database, so we're using our if statement here to connect to the database. And this is only valid if we actually connect to the database. But before we do that, we're going to do a try and catch because we're performing all of this under a database context, right? So we want to capture any database messages that, any database errors that we find. Hey, yeah, go ahead and do whatever you want.
I just needed my tablet. Why didn't you tell me that you were teaching? Because I was just right there.
Okay. All right, so first we connect, and then we write our SQL insert statement. So now an easy way to do that is to actually go here. Well, we'll just do it by hand. Okay, and that way it's good practice for you guys, anyways. So we go string query equals uh, go insert into registration dot reg user. You don't really need a registration. You can just go reg user, right? And then now if you specify exactly where you want each thing, each item to be, then it's a little bit easier to decipher uh, when you actually. Now, it's really cool that NetBeans allow you to do this too, right? So when you actually just press insert enter within a string here, NetBeans will automatically do something like this for you. Okay. So carriage returns will allow you to do that directly. But first, we just want to do ID, first name. Now in the database is underscored, so last name, um, email, address, city, state, zip, occupation, birth date, and phone. Okay. So birthday is underscored as well. So, all right. So those are the fields within the database that we actually want to do that. We can go to my SQL Workbench and verify that. All right. So we actually want to make sure that the fields correlate with each other, right? So in order to do that, we can look at the columns either on the left here, or you just go select rows, and we'll see that the columns on the top are those columns that we're trying to insert into. First name, last name, email, address, city, state, zip, occupation, birthday, and phone. Okay, so all of these do line up with what we're trying to insert into. Okay, and now we just say values. So, and prepared statement, and which is what we're going to use, we want to insert the number of values that goes into it, right? So we got for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So we just need 11 question marks. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Okay, so all of these are going to be in place of what we're going to insert in. Okay, so now we want to create a prepare statement. So we go prepare statement. Right, and then we go to stmt, and then t short for statement equals connection. We already established our connection with the connect function up there, and then we're gonna say prepare statement, and then we want to go query. Right, so we created a prepare statement here, and we're using the statement. Now you have to actually import the prepare statement, or it does not work. Okay, and then we're oh, actually all of this should be going in here. Right, so the cache is out here. My fault. So yeah, Shift Alt format again so that everything looks good. All right, so the prepare statement, connection prepare statement. So we created a statement here, right? But we actually need to set our variables in there. So we want to say statement dot set int for the ID, and then we just want to pass one ID. Okay, so that's our first variable that we're passing in, and our ID is not capitalized. Okay, now we can actually go and do the rest. Now, before we do that though, we can do something like this, right? So we want to set 11, so we can say Control Shift, and we duplicate 11 of these. Right? That way we know exactly. That way we don't have to type all those stuff. 1 and then ID, and then 2 is going to be first name, right? 3 will be sorry, this string. So let's do that again. Right, so let's get rid of these. Okay, let's do this again. So because of this, we actually want to do set string for the rest of these. Okay? So 2, do first name. Again, the data type actually has to respond to the object name. Okay, so correspond to the variable type within the database SQL Server. So in our case, ID is actually an integer. So we're setting the integer, and we've already converted the integer the ID to an integer up here, so this will work, right? So if it's not a valid integer, your set it's gonna fail, right? So, and then 3 here is gonna be last name. 4 is going to be address, well, email. 5 is going to be address. Now, keep in mind that these positions have to correspond with the respective position in your query up there. If it doesn't, if you don't do that, then this is gonna fail. Okay, there's a caveat to that. Right? Address, city, then state, then zip, and then job. That goes into occupation, and then B date. And then finally the last one is phone. Okay. So just to recap, all of this ID, first name, last name, emails, address, city, state, zip, occupation, birthday, and phone all have to correspond to each other, right? Or it's not going to work. Okay. Now, when that's done, we go into row equals statement dot execute update. What this does then is that it's gonna execute the statement that we just created, right? And then the row is just an arbitrary ID, but we could say that is the number of rows affected. So we would say S out again, and then we would say rows affected. This will indicate to us how many rows were created or updated. This should actually be just one, right? Okay, so and finally we want to show that we've created one. So we use the J option message dialog again. Say we want an added user, right? Then we say ID plus name plus. Now this is a contextual message for the user, telling them that hey, the user has been added. Now we say last name, so they know that whatever it is that they added to the database has been added. All right, so that's done. Okay, so yeah, and the final thing we want to do is we want to close it. So we're going to say connection close. All right. And then our else here is if anything fails, right? Oh. Right, so if anything fails, we're gonna just show we couldn't connect to the database. So again, we just copy this. So paste it down here. Here. Could not connect to the database. Right. All right, so that's it. That's it for the insert function, right? So we can test this out. Again, before we do that, let's format it. Sorry. Format it properly. Alt Shift F again to format it. All right. So it looks good now. So we run it. I'm not anticipating 100% correctness here, but I could just say 324. Put anything in you want. Now with the insert here, because we're doing we're doing a prepared statement, all of this is valid, right? And if we and as you can see here, it added a new user. We go OK. Refresh. And we actually have a new user. Okay. So if I select anything else, I go back to here. all the data retained. So this means that my insert succeeded. Okay. Now we close out of this, and then we can do the update statements now. Okay, so the update statement itself is essentially the same thing as this, except we're doing updates. Now we've already captured all of the data up here, right? And then we want to do the update. So the next thing to do is to just say, and we're already capturing the mode here. The mode is mode's update. Okay, so we're already capturing that mode. So how would we go about this, right? Well, it's pretty much doing the same thing as the insert here. So we can pretty much copy everything we did in the insert up to all the way down here. We're pretty much doing the same exact thing, except this time we don't care about checking for the ID, right? So instead of check ID here, we can take out this logic, right? Oops. Yep, so we took out the logic, Alt Shift F again. All right, so we took out that the whole logic of checking the ID because we don't need to check ID. This is an update, so we want to create a new prepare statement, but the SQL query has to change, right? We want to change it to an update statement. So we will say update update reg user set, right? And then we can actually pull all of these in, right? Set first name, last name, and all of that stuff into here. Okay. And then we're going to say where ID equals plus ID. Okay. So what does that mean? Well, our query is actually saying, hey, I'm going to update the reg user, set the first name, last name, email equal to all of these things, but we're going to set it to equal to a question mark. The question mark being and we're going to seed those question marks with the prepared statements, okay? Now, if you do it the other way with straight SQL, then you're going to run into the issue of quotes and all that stuff, and this will not work for you, okay? But if you're doing prepared statements, this will definitely work for you, okay? All right. So this is our execution statement, our prepared statement. Now the only thing we have to change is the positioning of all of this, right? Now instead of where ID equals ID, we can say where ID equals question mark as well, right? So this ID position is now at 11 because it's the very last thing, okay? So we just have to move this down to the bottom here. We don't really have to. It just depends on the number of the numbers here, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, so if you did this right, because you were just copying exactly the positionings from up here down here, right? So if you did this right, all of this will be reflected properly. Okay, so and then we can just say updated that user instead of an error. Well, instead of the other thing that we're going to do, and then we just say show an error down here if something doesn't happen properly, right? It's the same error really, so so it should be consistent with what we want to do. So yeah, the update statement is pretty straightforward, right? And you can reuse some of the code that you have up here. So let's try. Let's give it a try and see if it worked. Okay. Okay. So if I select something like this user, and I want to change his first name to Jeff, right? Now, if I say save, I update user and Jeff Keller to the database. Now you see that this is not right yet, right? But if I refresh it, it does change it. So it changes to Jeff, right? So it's reflected in the database. And we are saying that these positionings are right because it did change the first name to Jeff, right? Now the test would be to change the birthday, right? So to like 2001, 1105, right? So we save the user for Tobias to that. All right, so we save Tobias. Now we go to Annie. We come back to Tobias, 2001, 1105. So we know that it's reflecting the birthday properly, and that's it. That's pretty much the second assignment 5. And now I'm gonna leave the delete to you guys. That should be a pretty straightforward one to do. So so yeah, that's it for today. That's it for this lesson, and hopefully you guys had this brings some light into the actual assignment itself. Hopefully this guides you into doing your project phase 4. All right, that's it.